Philosophers talk to our times. The natural history of Mysdle. What is the point of philosophy? An introduction. For me, I think it was John Malarkey. It jokingly summarised in a conference all of philosophy since Einstein as a question of either consolation or consolidation, with the Anglo-American philosophy always consolidating knowledge, finding out what you can know, endlessly defining and redefining the nature of problems, logical problems that could be solved or not, on the one side, and consolation in the post-Heideggian world of working out what it means to live in a world beyond anything guaranteeing you a single identity as one thing in one body. A world beyond the death of God, then, where the death of simple identity is its natural corollary, and you must find other ways to think your being. Other ways to find purpose, if you want to go full existential, or just other ways to be free. In a universe that is different from how we all have thought it for thousands of years. And as a basic division, I find it bewitching. I am, of course, very firmly on the consolation element of that. But as with all great summaries, it's too basic. In that, the kind of continental philosophy that I love has always tried to rethink philosophy. Not just in terms of how to console ourselves beyond the death of God, but also to understand, to hollow out, to explore the kind of freedom that gives one. Because you no longer live in a world of objects, so much as a world of forces or will to powers, or interlocking elements, all caught up one with the other, where nothing necessarily has a definitive essence, and simply is. How could it be? A creator didn't make it. It's always on a journey from somewhere to somewhere. And we're all caught up in life that is constantly in the middle, just jostling around. That's why, for me, the greatest of all modern philosophers, I say without the slightest doubt, is Deleuze. And that is because Deleuze is supremely able to explore such territories. He's very good at doing what is the fundamental task of all continental philosophy, which is to challenge, decenter the sense that you have, or the sense of the tools by which humans, by mean the West, has since whenever, Greece, before Socrates, after Socrates, before Augustine, perhaps just before Kant, but for centuries, understood themselves in terms of relatively straightforward, simple constructions that actually have no solid foundation in anything simple or real. I'm talking about concepts of the self or identity, or even, strictly speaking, of the body, all the corollaries of the soul, all the things that require you to understand the world in terms of one label which you define and then you move on. All that stuff which has become unthinkable beyond the death of God. And what Deleuze is doing is then exploring the freedom that opens up in numerous different ways. Different ways, therefore, you can understand time. Time moves on. It is no longer anything to do with movement. It is no longer a continuity, but rather that discontinuity in which we are all created, through which we live our lives. Events are not simply there, once and for all, done, but rather become what they are, into their own singularity, as they are caught up in the middle for other events, in the middle through other events, always changing what they are, never definitively defined. always evolving, always erupting, so that what you thought was true about any historical event in your or any event of your life shifts and evolves across time, unfolds different ways to think itself. In a universe where things are not simple or fixed, where the battle may or may not have happened, or if it did happen, it didn't happen as we thought it did, where we're also caught up in a world where what didn't happen and its long shadow matters just as much as what did. On the level of time, on the level of events, because it affects how we understand who and where we are. So that identity becomes endlessly reworkable, restitchable. It ceases to be anything than a name. And I will go back again and again to the theory of events, because I find it in Deleuze one of the most intoxicating places. And the movement of time, beyond biology towards a crystalline version of time. A time of many threads, many forking terms. A time where stories are no longer simply told, no longer conform to anything about truth, but rather become the shifting identities of what it means to exist in time, where you are never fixed, where you could always be restitched. And as with all great philosophers who work in the manner of Deleuze, he throws out very many ideas. Some I adore. I adore crystal time. Personally, I've always adored the image of the body that he gets relatively late, I would probably argue, in his career, from the Deleuze letters. So those are letters that Leibniz wrote when he was pretending to believe in the body. He writes them to a Jesuit, I think. And in those sequence of letters, he invents a theory of the body that is utterly, utterly unique. But he's doing it firmly tongue-in-cheek. He writes incredible things in those letters. He makes astonishing claims about the matter, he says, is morality. And morality is matter. And Deleuze, coming to them late in life, restitches them into a theory of the fold, into a theory that allows you to really understand position, what it is, to have a body that houses perceptions, that unfolds a universe from within inside its own fleshy interior, so that being you are one body, but as you look upon that body, it contains a universe inside, a universe of perceptions that are already inside you, of you, even if they talk to what lies beyond. It's an amazing theory, and I would probably argue revolutionises how Deleuze understands how philosophers understand the body. And it's one of those interesting, there's a moment in Deleuze scholarship there, that famously he he rebought when he was starting the Leibniz book, all his editions of Leibniz. And it is true that the references he uses of Leibniz in the book he writes in 1987, which is towards the end of his career, are radically different from the way he used Leibniz much earlier on in Difference and Repetition, where Leibniz is a major league philosopher, and even more in Logic and Sense. He discovers the Deleuze letters, discovers a theory of the body, and that changes how he can understand philosophy. Or again, there are concepts within Deleuze that I can see are absolutely wonderful, but that others do not use them, that for me never speak. I mean particularly the body without organs. It's never worked for me as an idea, not because I don't see that it doesn't work, not because I'm not I don't see, not because I don't understand why it is such an important concept, but just because it doesn't resonate. And one of the great joys for me of the kind of postmodern philosophy that this series will be about, is that it is endlessly full of tools. You don't have to accept them all. You don't have to run with every idea. That's not the point of it. The point of this sort of philosophy, you see, is not to define being, because there is no definition. It's not to endlessly console you for the death of God, because no consolation is necessary. It's neither. Its point is to give you different pivots, different ways you can understand what you are, different, very Deleuze and Guattari phrase, concepts, different conceptions of how you can think thought. Why? Oh, because in a world where we're trapped within an entropy trap, a world that is warming up, where chaos is gathering, and the forces of madness are everywhere, being able to rethrow who you are, helping others to rethrow how they are, to think the world differently at all sorts of different levels, from personal ethics to ethics of groups to ethics of communities, is clearly one of the most important things that any thinker could be doing now. Here, deep in the Pyrenees, there is always a dream of community. How are we going to survive the coming apocalypse? I mean, that's a big word, but I probably mean it. How are we going to survive those events that are likely to unfurl as the Antarctic ice has melted? That is likely to, in the space of 30 years, render human civilization as we currently live it increasingly untenable, is a real question. And always the answer, we all sit upon our hands and say we must all live in sustainable communities. To which I always think to myself, why? Have you ever tried living in a sustainable community? It's not at all easy. Really, it isn't. And it never becomes easy. But one of the things for me, one of the tasks of philosophy is to allow humans to understand who they are, where they begin, that thing that we call our egos, that thing that we call our selfishness, those things we call our emotions, in such a way to ease into such communities, to allow them to articulate one against the other, to get them spinning along. Because it is only in such communities, robust or otherwise robust, or if not robust, ephemeral, but constantly re-evolving, that we're going to have a chance, a hope of creating human organization capable of lasting and keeping technology and keeping learning in the shifting chaos to come. In a sense, then, philosophy has never been more urgent. That task of rethinking what humanity is, beyond the nihilism of enforced, asserted religion, beyond the nihilism of simply assuming that nothing has changed, beyond the certainty of the growth of entropy, destroying how we understand humanity, and the necessary slip to barbarity that we all assume is just what happened. If you can think of some other path, some other routes, now is the time to do it. And for me, that is what philosophy is peculiarly able to do. It is peculiarly able to go through, to sift through the ways we understand the world, and through them restitch how we understand ourselves. Or, vice versa, from the way we understand ourselves, rethink what it is to live in a world. And to take concepts like Leibniz's concept of the monad, or his concept of, systematic chain? The chain bit is right, I've got the first bit wrong. In the Deleuze letters. And understand through it how we contain the world and the world contains us. And how that then changes how you have to understand what it is to understand the world. And all those standard philosophical questions. All of them become urgent if you're trying to think about how do you create a human capable of living together in the kind of communities that are liable to survive what is to come. It's one of those ironies, I think, about humanity, is that we all think we know where we want to end up. You ask most humans, they'll say very similar things. Our problem is that we're not very good at getting there. We're not very good at getting there because we have these deep versions of how we understand who and what we are that are forever getting in the way. And then, of course, we naturalise them and say, well, that's just human nature. Is it? Really? Are you sure? And it is that question mark that I hope is the legacy of postmodern philosophy. That are you really sure that's all you could be? Are you really sure that's all the universe is? or could ever dream to be. In these series then, I will outline different senses we are caught up in the world. Part of it. So I've used a Heideggerian phrase and I didn't really mean to then, but I'll let it stand for now. Different senses then we are in the middle of everything, and how one understands that middle. Beyond the Spinozian relatively simple formula of absolute middle, which is wonderful and really works, and yet, to be honest with you, to call it vague is not quite right, but it is over abstract. So I want to pull out different senses that we are caught up with in the world, and different things that follow on from them, and different ways we could understand who and what we are. This book then is called The Natural History of Mysdle, which is partially a joke. When I was a kid, I had a book about a village in Shropshire called Mysdle, and it was called The History in Our Times, The History of Mysdle. And so the natural history of Mysdle, of how we are caught up within everything, always struck me as the best way to understand, in some sort of bestiary, different ways we could be, different ways we could rethink who and what we could be, as a way to respond to the world that seems collapsing around us.